and I will put them to Alex when we get to the end of his speech. So Alex, really good to welcome you. I explained earlier you were the Shadow Minister for Tourism and Heritage, sort of Nigel Huddlestone's shadow, MP for Leeds Northwest, and obviously somebody who knows our business very, very well. And as I was saying, we've engaged with you frequently over the course of the past few months. And it's great to see you, and I really, really appreciate you giving us some time this morning. We've got about 150 of our members on the call, covering the entire amusement machine supply chain, and they're really looking forward to hearing from you. So if I can hand over to you now, Alex, I'll come back to you once you've finished and ask you a few questions.
Thanks, John. Thanks for inviting me. I mean, it's a shame that we can't be at the QE2, and hopefully next year we will be, and I'll be able to visit and meet all of you in person and talk to people in the supply chain as well, which I haven't had a chance to do really in this role. It's been really useful to engage with BACTA this year, and actually I've just listened to you for this last 10 minutes, and there are a couple of issues there that I wasn't really aware of, and I must say I'll have to speak to John further about the trade dispute with the US and how the Brexit deal or lack of, because it is still marginal whether there'll be an actual deal or not before the end of the year. So that's all really useful for me as somebody who has to keep track of all of these things. Obviously today is a day where many of your businesses have found out that you won't be reopening because you're placed in Tier 3 restrictions. We found out that in Leeds we'd also be in Tier 3 restrictions, even though our positivity rate has come right down, and our actual rate of COVID is under 300 per 100,000, which was supposedly the benchmark for Tier 2 restrictions. So it's, I'm sure you've all been on this call and been looking at your phones and listening to the news and working out what it means for your business, and the sites crashed as well in typical a government manner when everybody tries to find out public information. So we're living in these very strange times, which are exceedingly difficult, and I absolutely understand the business planning, continuity, security of your businesses, looking after your workforce is exceedingly tough during COVID. And I think that part of my approach is around working with you to try and ensure that your businesses are still there when we get through this, when the vaccine's implemented, when we've lifted restrictions and people can get back to going on holidays like they normally do. And there's a lot of talk about coming back differently, building back better, however we want to describe it. And part of that for me, a really big part of that for me, is seeing a big return to the Great British Holiday. Many more people this year went on even a short break in the UK where they wouldn't have done normally because of COVID, because of the restrictions, the difficulties with flights, the cancellations, the quarantining, the lack of travel corridors, certain countries, etc., etc. And at the beginning of the summer, I went on a mini tour of the South Coast, and that included going to Brighton. I had a really great tour of Brighton Pier and the amusement centre there with Anne, who's the CEO. I don't know if Anne's on the call or not. These webinar things, you don't quite know. You can't look at an audience. There's nobody there to vibe off. So, but hopefully Anne's here, and it was a really useful day. And I've been to a number of other amusement arcades, undercover, if you like, in places like Morecambe, here in London. I'm still in London now. After this, I'm going to get on the train and go back to Leeds, on the South Bank, in our Yorkshire resorts as well. So I've seen the range. And I know it's not just a coastal industry; it is an industry that exists in the cities as well. So I'll just move on to my main responsibility is, and you might ask me questions about gambling and changing gambling law, but actually that sits under my colleague, who's the Shadow Sports Minister, Ali McGovern. So I'm happy to look at them. I might not be able to give you a full answer because it's not part of my brief. My brief very much is about the visitor economy and tourism and the interrelationships within tourism. And that does include tax issues, which I obviously have to talk to. And I actually spoke to her yesterday, the Shadow Exchequer Secretary. I'll sort of move on to a few remarks in those areas. So the my view actually of your industry as it exists in our coastal towns and our traditional seaside resorts is that you are an anchor industry. What is absolutely clear, and my visit to Brighton illuminated this, is that the Great British Holiday, that there is a feature of it, if you go on the Great British Holiday, that it is inevitable that you will get one or more days of rain. And when it rains, then people go to inside attractions. Many inside attractions, obviously, are chargeable, and many families might not be prepared or might not be able to afford the entry fee. And so they look for other indoor attractions where they might be able to spend a smaller amount of money, you know. And I don't know that, I have to be honest, I don't know the industry terms for all of your machines, but, you know, I spent many enjoyable afternoons as a child, and even more recently with a tub of tuppennies, putting them into the machine, trying to win, usually fairly fruitlessly, a prize. And again, this is a really, you know, it's a good value activity. And when I was in Brighton in the pier, it started to rain very heavily when we were due. We had obviously a timed visit, but it just illuminated the whole thing that it started to rain about half an hour before, and we had to walk all the way from the I-360 to the pier in the rain. And then when we got there, there was a queue because everybody else had done the same thing and headed to the pier, to the amusement centre in the rain. And, you know, and you play a really vital role of having a free to enter indoor attraction, particularly when the weather turns. And our seaside resorts wouldn't be the same without you and your industry. And I think that's really important to remember. We also regularly go on holiday to Barry Island, and if it's not, the weather's not good, or you've done your walk on the beach, the amusement centre is one of the biggest attractions in Barry Island. There isn't that much, to be honest, in Barry Island. And again, it's a real anchor for small seaside communities like that. I saw the same thing when I went to Morecambe this year. You know, your industry creates that anchor on the seafront, and is, you know, hugely important. I absolutely understand this year has been very difficult for your industry, and we also need to look at the wider issue of investing in seaside resorts. You know, the so-called levelling up agenda is really important. There are obviously some government schemes that have come forward, and some that potentially are proposed as well. So we've got the Coastal Communities Fund, and that is funding improvement infrastructure in coastal communities. We've got the proposed post EU Shared Prosperity Fund. We don't know the exact shape of that, but we really need to see a heavy investment in our coastal communities from that fund. And we also have the tourism deal, or tourism deals. And my view, and actually it's shared by many Conservative MPs. I was recently speaking to a couple of MPs from Norfolk, new Conservative MPs, and there's a very strong view that we need to rapidly upscale the number of these deals to cover many more areas. And I think actually, because of COVID, that I've spoken to Nigel Huddleston about this, we need to have a review of what those tourism deals look like, what they include, the scope and the scale. And again, if you've got ideas around that, I'd be happy to hear them about what we could further include in tourism deals, and also in terms of the scale of tourism deals. Also, I think that the promotion of our coastal communities could be a lot better. The destination management organisations, just like everybody else, have had an absolutely torrid year. You know, many of them are reliant on local authority funding. The local authorities that had to cope with COVID on the front line without adequate funding have got huge funding gaps. And I'm concerned about the collapse of DMOs. I also think that DMOs, when they started, and then there was a rationalisation of DMOs. When there was a period when we had regional DMOs, and then it sort of splintered. and DMOs are different everywhere. So obviously I'm from Yorkshire, we have Welcome to Yorkshire, it's a regional DMO. In the Southeast, you have a Southeast DMO, but then you also have local DMOs as well, sometimes like the one in Brighton run by the local authority. And that fragmentation, I don't think, is all that helpful. And I think we should have a review of DMOs and try and have a rationalisation of them and utilising them better in terms of promoting their areas to other parts of the country and abroad. And that comes actually now to the issue of Brexit. And I know that the majority of many of your customers will be domestic tourists, but there are also some of you who will be very heavily reliant on inbound tourism. So when I went to the gaming centre on the South Bank, it was very heavily inbound tourists there. And I bet if I went, well, obviously it's shut now, but London's going to be in tier 2. So if I go next week when it reopens, I don't think that would be the same, because we don't have inbound, we have very few inbound tourists in the UK currently because of COVID and all the restrictions. And what I'm concerned about is that some of the government proposals, for instance, the end of tax and duty-free shopping, because they're concerned about obviously an influx of EU shoppers not paying tax or duty, which obviously they have paid up to this point, those 27 countries, that would have a detrimental effect on inbound tourism. The visa regime we don't know about, again, that could have a detrimental effect on inbound tourism. And I think that we need to do as little as possible to affect inbound tourism, not just from the EU, but including from the EU, but from the wider world, from the US, from China, Japan, etc., as well as from the EU. And I know that for some of you that might have very little effect, but others that might have quite a serious effect in terms of your visitor numbers. I also know, and this is something again to have a discussion about, that next year has been designated the English Year of the Coast by the Coastal Communities Alliance, Natural England, the National Coastal Tourism Academy, and the New Economics Foundation. It's not absolutely clear what that will entail, and whether that's mainly really for those organisations around the natural world and the natural nature of our coast, which is obviously vitally important. But also, if we're going to have a Year of the Coast, it should include all of the coastal communities and those visitor attractions. So, it's about people going to the coast and utilising the coast. They want to encourage coastal visits by children. So again, your industry should be at the heart of that. And I don't know, and it'd be useful to hear if you've had any engagement with those organisations and what that would be. Obviously, we've got COVID to deal with, but I'm hopeful. I think we're all hopeful that by next summer, by the normal summer school holidays, we'll have the vaccine and things will have returned to some scale of normality. So I don't really want to talk for much longer, but I just want to touch on one thing before I finish, which I know you probably will ask me about, and that is, and I was lobbied on this both by John and other colleagues at BACTA and when I went to Brighton, and that's machine games duty. And I've seen the correspondence you've been having with HMRC, and that machine games duty is being treated very differently to VAT, which obviously the government have reduced to 5% for hospitality, although there are some exemptions, and some other similar industries to yourselves like bowling haven't been given that exemption, and I'm working on those issues as well. But machine games duty is an area similar to that where there hasn't been an exemption, and HMRC are pushing your industry to ensure that you have returns, even if they're nil returns. And I'm really happy to engage you about it. And like I said, I spoke to Exchequer, Shadow Exchequer Secretary around these sort of issues, and she wants me to bring forward a package of measures that, as Shadow Tourism Minister, I'd like to see changed, which can go forward. Obviously, the Treasury and obviously the Shadow Treasury team were very busy in the run-up to yesterday with the Chancellor's statement, and there was some positive news there. I'm not sure how much of that cash, well, one, how much of it is new, and secondly, how much will end up in our coastal communities, because a lot of it wasn't targeted. There was the 4 billion for the North, but a lot of that's in pilots. A lot of that does seem to be aimed at cities. So we need to fight for a fair share of the pie, one, to be distributed quickly, but also to be distributed evenly, and ensure that we get that sort of levelling out agenda between our coastal communities and our urban centres. So over to you, and happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Alex. Plenty to think about there. And again, I'll just remind members that if you want to ask a question of Alex, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens to type in a question, and I will put that to Alex. And funnily enough, Alex, the first one that's come along is to do with gambling. So I know you can't answer on all of these things, but one of the issues that we've had, and again, you may say that this is something that you can't deal with because of devolution, but one of the problems we've had in Wales, unlike in Scotland and in England, is that our adult gaming centres on the high street have not been able to benefit from the retail, leisure and hospitality rates relief scheme that has operated in England, and a similar version in Scotland. We've never really been able to engage properly with the Welsh Government. In fact, so we had a letter this week that just basically said, go away, we're fed up talking to you. And I know a lot of our members there are really annoyed with that, and would just appreciate, I think, any advice that you may be able to give to them and to BACTA on how to engage with the Welsh Government. I mean, you mentioned Barry Island. I mean, it's funny because that's one of the places we've often quoted to Welsh Government, because in Barry Island, you've got premises there, the family entertainment centres. They also have AGCs very often as part of them that are benefiting from the rates relief that the Welsh Government's prepared to give. But a mile up the road in Barry Town proper, there's two AGCs there getting absolutely nothing. And it seems to be a very, very bizarre situation from our perspective.
I mean, this sometimes is the issue with devolution. Is the point of devolution is that devolved administrations can make their own decisions, and I imagine this is one of those cases. I'll be honest, because it's devolved, it isn't, sounds like a cop out. But I'm going to come around to being non-cop out after it isn't part of my portfolio. But we do engage the Welsh Government, and actually, generally, what happens, this is the converse, is that quite often Wales does things better than England, or better than the UK government does in England, and we use that as an example about why England should do things. So conversely, I can't, when things are better in England and Scotland, or even Northern Ireland than in Wales, I can't take that as a cop out. So I mean, actually, the Welsh Finance Minister, Rebecca Evans, is somebody I went to university with, so I've known her a very long time. And I actually would be happy if you let me know. I'd be happy to write to her and see if I can get a better response from her than you have. Because I imagine, in terms of the Welsh finances, it is probably a very small amount of money compared to the budget of the government of Wales. So I'm not sure that maybe there's more to it than just a strictly financial decision. But I wouldn't want to second guess Rebecca, but I'm happy to write to her.
Yeah, and that would be great, Alex, and I appreciate that. And if there is some other reason behind it, it would be just good to know, because we've not been able to get that straight answer from the Welsh Government. And as you say, it's not expensive, probably less than £1 million, which it's a lot of money to me and you. But in the greater scheme of things, having listened to the Chancellor yesterday, it's a pinprick. And we just don't understand why good Welsh businesses with Welsh people being employed, supporting Welsh high streets are being denied this. It seems to be either ideological or a mistake, and we just can't get to have that engagement that we want with the Welsh Government. So I'll take you up on that offer, if I may. The other issue, again, slightly out of your brief, but you did mention it, machine games duty and VAT. I think our take home from the correspondence and conversations we've had with the Treasury, that we need to treat those two very, very differently.
Yeah.
The VAT issue seems to us to be one where we've just, a bit like bowling, we've just been sort of excised from the benefit for, again, a reason we can't quite get to the bottom to, whereas the justification for giving it to those premises and businesses that do get the VAT at 5% is equally as applicable. And just trying to, again, navigate that particular argument has been quite difficult. We'd appreciate your help on that, as you've given previously, and MGD much more of the kind of high streety issue, although it does benefit the seaside as well. But for our pubs and arcades, that would be, in exactly the same way as the VAT cut, a real injection of cash into businesses that know best how to spend it to make sure that they get through to the other side of this crisis. And just finally on that, before I ask you to comment, I think one of the issues, generally speaking, allied to that is, do you think supply chains have really been recognised in the thinking that's taken place within government through this COVID-19 crisis? Because we don't think so, and certainly it's a view that's shared by certain other business organisations too. And the point, I think, simply is that if you don't support the supply chain, so people, for instance, supplying machines to pubs and clubs, or the manufacturers and distributors supplying, the pushers to the seaside arcades, if they're not there because they've not been supported, when we get to next summer, as you say, when we hope we've got some sense of normality, well, businesses aren't going to be successful when we've got the recovery. They're not going to be able to benefit from what we hope for is pent-up demand. And that seems to me to be very short-sighted from this government.
Well, that's three questions. So I'll take each one in turn. So the question around VAT, what I'm trying to do at the moment is compile a list of industry sectors that have fallen between the gaps, and I've got yours, and I've got the Tenpin bowling alleys, and I haven't got much else. I'm trying to find out about, for instance, trampoline parks or others that I view as part of the leisure sector, but the government or the Treasury haven't recognised as such. And I'm talking, like I said, the Shadow Exchequer Secretary, and trying to compile a list over then that our Shadow Treasury team then take that up with the government to ask them for the VAT cut. I mean, the other thing, although it doesn't obviously help you because you're not getting the VAT cut now, is about an extension to the VAT cut. But obviously, if you then get it, and then, we'll obviously campaign for it to be backdated to July, I think it is, then obviously an extension would help you either way, because it's a cash flow issue for your members. I absolutely get that. Again, the machine games duty is worth treating separately, because again, like the Shadow Treasury team is probably a little bit like the Treasury in some ways, although with far fewer officials. That they can be a bit cautious, and so rather than bundling things up, it's better to do one thing at a time. Because obviously, it's better to win on one measure rather than lose on a bundle of measures. So and I've got a lot of sympathy with the machine games duty, but the across Parliament, I think it's fair to say, and within Treasury and Treasury teams, there are mixed views on gaming, which I'm sure and all your members know that's the case. So the VAT issue in some ways is easier than the machine games duty, but I do think that basically because of the need to keep the ecosystem, particularly of our coastal communities and of our high streets, together, we need to view this period very differently to what will come after, hopefully from next summer, and that there should be exemptions or at very least holidays in all of these areas of taxation. I've got the casinos in my brief, and they've got, again, similar issues. Obviously, I don't want to mix you up because it's very different, particularly when we talk about gambling, and that doesn't really help you actually. But the same sort of conversations having with Michael Duggar at the Betting and Gaming Council as well about casinos. So and then the last question, which was more about the supply chain. So I think that within government, when you talk to, I mean, it's different. It does differ by department. So in DCMS, you generally get a better hearing and you generally get a better understanding than in Bays or in Treasury. Treasury probably get the worst hearing, to be honest, and then that probably does filter across into the shadow teams as well a little bit. But I think there is a recognition of certain parts of the supply chain and not others. So, for instance, across leisure and hospitality. So I think there is a good understanding of the supply chain in terms of food and drinks industry. So that part of the supply chain, I think, is well understood. I think there's another part of the supply chain, which is probably this part of the supply chain you're referring to, which is much less understood. And I know about that in Leeds, because in Leeds we have Sound Leisure, which is, I'd say, the best jukebox manufacturer in the world, and that there's very little visibility from government for that part of the supply chain, and they obviously their order book is right down this year. And I imagine it's the same right across, arcade manufacturers, fruit machine manufacturers, all of that, and also people, we also have the whole conference and events industry, and their supply chain has been decimated. And a lot of those people aren't in limited companies, and don't have physical premises. So they haven't even got, the business grant schemes. They haven't even been eligible for those, or B bills or C bills or any of the government measures, and they're part of the so-called 3 million excluded. And I know that they aren't necessarily a core part of your industry, but if you were in the QE2 today, you'd need them to deliver your event, but they're all unfortunately sat at home with no income. So I think that there is a lack of understanding of supply chain where it relates to things that aren't immediately obvious. But I do think that DCMS have got a better hold of that, and Treasury have been very heavily lobbied, and BEIS, by the conference and events industry. So you'd think that the message would be getting through by now. They can't claim ignorance. We had a terrible interview with, I think she was a PPS, I think she was the BEIS PPS, and she did not recognise that anybody had been excluded from support. And it was mind-boggling that somebody who's in the government, who goes to briefings, might not have executive responsibility, but goes to all the briefings, goes to team meetings, for some reason, though, that the officials weren't discussing it in those meetings. And that is dereliction of duty. And I imagine the same thing is happening with certain parts of the supply chain. But hopefully now, because it's been going so long, then and we've been raising it in the chamber, and been raising it in the media, and the media have been raising it, so hopefully the message is getting through now.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And I think it probably is. Our most recent conversation with the Treasury was interesting, because that was reflected back to us. Oh, yes, you are saying this, as are other organisations, but it's not translated yet into the level of support. I mean, there is some now, and there is some recognition of supply chains in England anyway, which has been helpful. In Scotland, it's been even worse, because not only have we been in the position of pubs essentially being closed, but when they have opened, one of the issues has been, oh, well, you can't have your music on in pubs, which has hurt jukebox suppliers no end. I mean, it's crazy. There's no good reason for it either. Of course, in England, you've got 85 decibel limit. And we're still pressing on that in Scotland. And they, to support what you've just said, have kind of said, yeah, supply chains are important, but they've tended to say, well, it's only food and perishable goods that can get any support. And our members up there are just tearing their hair out, to be honest. They don't know which way to turn in Scotland for support. And we just have to keep lobbying on that. And I do need to just say that, in a rather BBC fashion, that whilst Sound Leisure are very good members of BACTA and they make fantastic jukebox, there are other manufacturers of jukeboxes available. If I don't say that, my other jukebox manufacturing members will criticise me no end. I
probably managed to upset every other jukebox manufacturer in the UK now, but I have to show a bit of local loyalty. And I've been to Sound Leisure when I was on the council, so I've seen what great work they do.
Yeah, they're great jukeboxes. I'm conscious of time. We have got another speaker coming up, Alex, but I do want to sort of finish on one very much coastal point, if I may, with you. And we really, really do appreciate your support and your understanding of our issues around the coast. It's not true of every politician that we speak to, I have to say. So it is really, really recognised and welcomed amongst the BACTA membership. But I was very interested in what you were saying about the conversations you're having with Nigel Huddleston about the sector deal, the tourism sector deal. I wasn't really aware that there were opportunities to effectively revise that. And I just wondered if any sort of ideas had started to bubble along in the conversations about what might be different to what we know around support for DMOs, tourism areas, etc., etc.
So to be fair, I might maybe slightly misrepresent it. Nigel isn't saying that they'll be revisited, but I'm saying it should be revisited, and we're getting an increasing number of backbench Conservative MPs who represent coastal communities or areas with tourism, even if they're not quite on the coast, saying that. So, you know, like I said, I spoke to two MPs who happen to be on my select committee about this. Steve Double, who's been, I have to say, has been an absolutely great champion of coastal communities and has a beautiful constituency. I went to his constituency, I was on holiday there on the River Foy this summer. Has been championing this idea, as well as actually Southwest MPs generally pretty solidly have. Or Devon and Cornish MPs pretty solidly have. So it hasn't. The government haven't said it yet, but there is quite heavy lobbying on all sides of the house for it to happen. This next period, the period probably from January to Easter, that is probably the period where, if we're going to be successful in reopening the tourism deals and getting an extension of them, then that's probably when it'll happen.
Good words.
But I mean, it'd be good for BACTA to add their voice. You know, Tourism Alliance have been calling for it. The Coast and Tourism Academy has been calling for it. So it's generally, the more sectors that call for it, the better.
Thank you for that, Alex. Thank you for that clarification. And most certainly, I'll work with Kurt at the Tourism Alliance. And we've got plans for participating in the Year of the Coast next year as well. Our immediate task, obviously, is to make sure as many of our members can actually see Easter next year, because it's such a desperate situation at the moment. And actually, do you know what? It's quite nice to talk positively about some of the things that may come after Easter next year, where, as you say, with the vaccines, we may actually be looking at some sense of normality and beginning to trade in a way that we're familiar with, albeit probably in slightly different, with a slightly different perspective. Look, Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it, and we will continue our engagement going forward. If I was in the QE2, I'd be inviting a massive round of applause from the audience. If you could all do it privately, please, and I'll see if I can hear anybody clapping. Alex, it's been fantastic to see you again. Thanks for today, and have a good day, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks very much, John.
Great, bye-bye. So thank you to Alex, and thank you to members. I hope you found that interesting and worthwhile. I thought there were a couple of things in there that were very interesting. He has, as I said, been a very good friend to us. James and I have engaged with Alex on a number of occasions, and he's always taken stuff away, and he's always done it. He's not promised and not delivered. So very good to hear some of the things that he said today, which we will follow up on, and very encouraging to hear that he's going to be able to write to Rebecca Evans in Wales. So we're moving towards the end of the morning, and as I said, given the timings and everything, we've sort of moved James from before Alex to after Alex, and I know James is now going to give his address to you. But before he does, I hope you don't mind, James, I just wanted to say a few words, because it seems like it was only yesterday that I popped over to see you in Milton Keynes. When Gabby was still president, and said, what should we work on for your presidency? And we had a long discussion, and I tell you, COVID-19, as you know, wasn't one of them. James has had probably the most challenging set of circumstances to deal with that I've known, not only with BACTA presidents, but presidents going back into the bread and timber industries. I mean, it has been one hell of a year. There's no doubt about it. And the fact that James, that you, James, have dealt with this so diligently and with such dedication, I think is testament to the fact that you've got BACTA and this industry running through your veins. There's no doubt about that, in my view. And I know that you've always wanted to do the job as well as you possibly can. And I don't think there's anybody looking at you now on this call, or indeed in the wider membership, that can turn around and say you haven't done a fantastic job. And it's not just about COVID, it's about everything else. We've had Cat Ds to deal with and so on and so forth. Plenty of issues that you've had to get to grips with during your presidency, which I do want to remind the members is actually not over today. You are still in office, and I know continue to work just as diligently through to March next year. But I want to say to members that, you know, James has been a fantastic president. He's always been available, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday, late into the evening, early morning. I've been speaking to James almost on a daily basis over the past 12 months, talking about the issues that we have in front of us, and James picking up the workload as well, dealing with MPs, dealing with members, making sure that our points are got across and that members fully understand them. And before you address us, James, I just wanted to say a very heartwarming and personal thanks from me to you for everything that you've done to support me and Bacta through what has been the most incredible year. James, over to you.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, John. I wasn't expecting that. I was thinking you say, well, can I wait to get rid of this one, but thank you very much. Very heartfelt and very much appreciated. And yes, this industry has been my life, and I've certainly given everything I could do for throughout this troubling period. And thank you very much for your comments, and much appreciated. So if I may move on and say, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this unusual convention. But it has been a rather unusual year. It feels very surreal speaking to you like this via my laptop in a room on my own. I feel a bit like someone reading the news. And I would much prefer to have been with you all in the QE2 conference centre and then in the pub afterwards. I just want to start, if I can, on a lighter note and share a message I had with a member. Is Mr. Bacta member wanted to share his thoughts on the support for Bacta. Mr. Frank Sinatra from That's Life Amusements said, James, I just wanted to send my thanks to Bacta. He said, I was riding high in early March. Shut down in May. He hoped to be back on top in June, but that didn't happen till July. And if it wasn't for Bacta, all I could do was cry. But there we are. That's life, I say, as that song goes. But after a positive start and a buoyant TAG in January, events rapidly descended in the most challenging and difficult and uncertain circumstances anyone could have ever imagined. Personally, I can't think of when I could think back to the events of the spring, they just don't seem real. And since then, it feels like a nightmare, and it would appear, unfortunately, one we have yet to wake up from. This time last year, I had no idea what was in store for any of us, and that my term as Bacta president would be so eventful. And it continues to be a consistent flow of issues. Week after week, something else pops up, highlighted most recently by the surprise introduction of 25% tariff on machine imports, as mentioned earlier. And Bacta has already joined with Euromat and Jason to lobby along with its American machine manufacturers to address this. And this on top of everything else, you just couldn't make it up. Even now as we speak, we are all eagerly awaiting to hear where we stand on the latest set of reopening tiers and restrictions. Then we have Brexit to look forward to and any surprises that may have in store. And in addition, we have the forthcoming gambling review to focus on. So we certainly have plenty to keep us busy. And throughout all of this, everyone at Bacta, the whole team, have been working flat out and will continue to fight every challenge with the utmost dedication. Each and every issue is taken on board, dealt with in a coordinated approach with the support from the members to reflect always their best interest. And like everyone, we've all had to adapt to this new normal. With facilities such as Zoom, we've been able to engage with our members across the country on a constant basis. And this was a key tool in coordinating and agreeing our reopening procedures with members and then with civil servants at DCMS. The Bacta team hit the ground running during the first lockdown in spring. Now, 10 months later, we are still running at full speed, dealing with constant changes in legislation. At first, it felt like a battle for our very survival, but it soon developed into a prolonged campaign fought and coordinated on several fronts, not just in England, but also in Scotland and in Wales, with the devolved nations developing their own individual approaches to handling the COVID crisis. So additional resources and lobbying, each government through Darren and DRAM communications was put in place. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Richard Case and Joseph Cullis as the regional chairs of those areas for all their effort on behalf of members in Wales and Scotland. And throughout all of this, BACTA has kept members fully updated on the latest developments and information, which I know has been appreciated by all. I have witnessed the trade association in full crisis mode. When I think back about the reopening of AGCs, for example, the first time in June that it got pulled at the 11th hour, John, you were still in the office late into the evening, calling MPs and rallying members to do the same. The phones didn't stop ringing. It really was all hands on deck, and I think we have a few more grey hairs to show for it. We have to be in the conversation when it comes to legislation. We have to engage and negotiate. Otherwise, we will be ignored and decisions will be taken on our behalf. I cannot stress enough how the hard work we have put in with John, myself, and all the team at Interrel, and you, the members, have reaped dividends when it comes to people being able to engage with MPs and get our case across. What I have noticed is how respected BACTA is among the politicians we deal with, and how as a trade body, and John, to use your words, we punch above our weight. Such was confirmed to me by Nigel Huddleston himself when he said he'd never been contacted by so many MPs on a single issue, re the 11th hour U-turn delaying our reopening. He couldn't apologise enough, and he said to me, don't ever underestimate the immense lobbying power of your members. And I think that, you know, we really need to take that on board. I've lost count of the number of video calls with politicians, ministers, MPs, DCMS, the Treasury, Gambling Commission. The list is endless. And I think we've used, John, just about every type of media communication there is. You know, Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, even some I'd never heard of. And at every opportunity we take to get our message and points across. And for the majority, I do think they have landed. But unfortunately, what's been clear throughout all this, not all the decisions have been based on facts and evidence, as the government has repeatedly said, insisted. And it seems to have got lost in the bottleneck that has been number 10. However, we continue to challenge and provide the evidence for these decisions. We carry on hammering away and have constantly raised issues of those that have been overlooked, like a supply chain of manufacturers and distributors and the difficulties faced by those supplying the pub and club market. AGCs and FECs have invested heavily in PPE and anti-COVID measures to reassure the public and keep our staff safe. And I believe BACTA members' premises are the safest I've seen compared to many other leisure and retail outlets and some supermarkets. Yet to some, it may appear that all this effort hasn't achieved that much, as we now appear to be back where we started. And I can certainly understand that. But I would strongly disagree, as I truly believe if it wasn't for all the coordinated effort of BACTA and the people within it, we wouldn't have reopened when we did, and that this industry would find itself in considerably worse situation than it is now. I know that might not be of some consolation, but it's definitely the case. I was really pleased to see the rollout of GPT and the cashless payment app. Although, like all of us, this was severely affected by COVID, and it was still able to demonstrate itself as a cost-effective and reliable alternative cashless payment method for the pub market, which can only grow. GPT are also developing an amusement-only solution for FECs that works via the same app, and along with a software version for the AGC market, so an exciting time ahead for the team at GPT. Another development to look forward to for the coming year will be the BACTA portal, which is almost ready for launch and which will provide instant access to the important information you need to run your businesses, to train your staff and protect your customers. And like the GPT app, it's run and supported by BACTA and its members for the benefit of all. As we look forward to the challenges of next year, we enter a crucial time. We head into another gambling review. We welcome it wholeheartedly as it represents a a significant opportunity for us to adapt our businesses for the future. A key focus will be on social responsibility, which is the heart of everything we do. We welcome Oliver Dowden's recent comments about how ensuring all aspects will be evidence-based, and we look forward to engaging with the department on this and making a valid contribution for the land-based sector. On Cat D fruit machines and the recent changes to voluntary restrict under 18s to play, as voted for Div 1 at the EGM and ratified here earlier this morning, I wanted to reiterate the importance of this move, which has already been widely welcomed by senior ministers and leading peers and anti-gambling organisations. As we approach the gambling review, there will be increased focus on children and gambling. And I think it's important that we remove FECs out of this spotlight altogether and enable them to concentrate solely on the entertainment they provide to millions of families annually without any concerns. I'm sure you will have seen the photos earlier of MPs in our arcades at the start of this convention. You saw the royal family. You must realise how important this is in terms of industry perception. We are in the industry of fun and entertainment. They know this already. You can see it on their faces. So going forward, let's concentrate on the positives we offer. Despite all the hard work, I found being president of BACTA a fascinating process, and I can look back on my experience as a massive learning curve, and it has given me a greater perspective of the different divisions of BACTA and the work that goes on into pursuing the interests of each and everyone. It may seem as though we're always talking about the seaside, but BACTA works just as hard further in the interests of all operators, including those in the pub sector and the supply chain or representing AGCs. The simple fact is the seasides are a emotive subject, and when it comes to publicity, it opens doors for us as an association. And I was really pleased to hear Alex Sobel comments just now recognising us as an anchor industry for the British holidays and a vital role for seaside resorts and small towns and their economies. In line with that, this year we launched our Save Our Seaside campaign. It gives us a real talking point with our MPs in coastal constituencies. This work is needed. Our Division 1 members are battling an historic lack of investment with many coastal towns and now they've lost a significant amount of their seasonal income. We are also pressing for further support measures on VAT, VAT reductions and extending rates relief. Excuse me 1 second. But, pardon me, they are not alone. We are also supporting the AGC sector, which is suffering as well, with curfew, tier 3 closures and lockdowns. We're commissioning a new CEBR report, pardon me, said it right, John, for the AGCs to show the contribution they make to the economy in a similar way to the report we commissioned last year for the seaside. Again, looking to January, we have EAG to look forward to. And like most things we've had to do in our lives and our businesses this year, we've had to adapt to this new normal. And like today, EAG is going online and it will be a virtual event. And like the first time we all use Zoom, it might seem a bit odd at first, but we all get used to it. And although it's no replacement for the real thing, hopefully it won't be too long before we can all catch up and meet again at the bar and talk about the various products on offer. So in the meantime, let's support our manufacturers and distributors. Let's get behind EAG Online and give Karen and her team our backing. Those of you who know me will be aware how passionate I am about the BACTA Charitable Trust and the support it provides to our charity partners. In addition, earlier this year, and despite the height of the COVID crisis, the BCT made 23 separate donations of £1,000 each to a range of charities around the country. And these charities were nominated by the BACTA Seaside Champion MPs. This highlighted some lesser known regional charities who were extremely grateful of the support, and this further cemented our relationship with all those involved and it would be great if we could repeat this again in the future. I'm also particularly proud of the Tickets to Wishes initiative, which has seen over 80 FECs across the country collect unused redemption tickets and turn them into wishes for seriously ill children and their families via Rays of Sunshine. I hope this is something we can refresh for next summer when, with a good wind, we'll have some normality back in all our lives. I want to finish on a positive note. In a few months, we'll be able to get together again to meet at events, socialise and network. And this has always been one of the best aspects of Back to memberships. But just before I draw this meeting to a close, there are some amazing people I'd like to highlight. There are a lot of people involved in BACTA, and I would like to say thank you, a big thank you to all those people who have given their time on the committees, and to those not yet involved. I would say this is your business. This is your future. You can make a difference. I would like to think I have. So please join in and have your say. And to Karen Cook for organising today and everything she does for BACTA. Karen, thank you very much. Nothing is a problem, and she just gets on and does it, and she's amazing. So thank you, Karen. I'd like to thank all the members of ManCom for putting up with me over my term. I'd especially like to thank Trevor Sutton and Joseph Collis for all their input and support on the Category D initiative. They spent a lot of time and effort on that, and I think it's the right thing to do, and thanks to them. To Catherine, Holly, and all the team at Interrel, and also to Steph Norbury, a very big thank you for all that you do for all the members on behalf of BACTA. I'd also like to thank Robert Gibb and Chris Haley for all their sterling effort looking after all the accounts on their finances and what has been such a terrible time. And a special thank you to all the team in the office at Ely Place, especially Teresa, who has worked non-stop all year, whatever the day or time. Nothing is a problem, even setting up Zoom when none of us knew really what it was. And also thanks to the guys on the compliance team for all their help dealing with the varied local authorities and supporting members across the country through these difficult circumstances. I'd also like to say a very special thank you to Linda Malcolm, and for her dedication to BACTA over so many years, and for the support she gave me throughout my BACTA journey. Because of this, I would like to take this opportunity to put Linda forward for a BACTA Life membership, which I am pleased to announce that Greg Wood has agreed to second. So perhaps, John, we could pick that up just towards the, we want to put that for the vote now, okay? So I wasn't aware that was going to pop up, sorry about that. So if I could ask those who would agree with me and join me in nominating Linda Malcolm for a life membership of BACTA and recognition for a service, please could you vote appropriately now as per the form and submit, please. I think it's the very least we can do for Linda. While that, are we waiting for the results of that to pop up, John? Wow, there we go. Thank you very much for your support. I know Linda will be very pleased to hear that, and it's great. So thank you for that. And we'll look to present that to Linda in the future when things are a bit back to normal, and we can have, I can give her a big hug, and then we can have a drink afterwards. Moving on, I'd like to thank Greg Wood for all his support as Vice President. I'm sure Greg will go on to be an excellent President for BACTA. He's got his head screwed on, he knows what he's doing, and I'm at the end of the phone if ever you need anything, Greg. I'm not going anywhere till March, so you've got a bit of time to put up with me just yet. And finally, I would just like to say to my big BACTA brother, John White, who has worked relentlessly and tirelessly this year. John, we've battled through thick and thin, from one issue to the next, and John, I think we've made a good team, to be honest. John has proved to be a massive benefit to BACTA throughout all these difficulties of this year, and we all owe him a very big thank you. So John, from me, I'd like to say thank you very much for everything that you've done on behalf of the members. Really would. That's pretty much all it is from me. It just remains me to thank you all for supporting me during my term as president. I would like to wish you all very well for next year and the future. And one day we can, look back at this and say how we got through it, and we will get through it, and we'll do it together. I also want to say that, I hope you feel I've been worthy of the role. I've tried to represent every member as if it was my own business. And as John said, spoke with the same frankness and passion to whoever would listen. And I've considered it a privilege to serve as the BACTA president. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you and good afternoon. And I'm going to hand back over to John now, if I may.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you for those very kind words. There's one last job that I'm going to ask you to do in just a couple of minutes, if you don't mind. So we're going to keep you hanging on as a delegate, as a panelist on the Zoom screen. But before we do finally close the convention, I would just personally as well like to offer my thanks. I've thanked you, James, and I need to thank everybody else who's been so supportive throughout the past 12 months since the last convention, because it has been, as we've said so many times, an extraordinary year. And I think BACTA's members, its staff, its support teams have really stepped up to the plate. I should perhaps just firstly thank all of the speakers today and all of you that are here before the members, Alex Sobel, of course, and Mancom. I've thanked Mancom for their support during the past 12 months, which is very heartfelt too. But I'd also personally like to thank the vice chairs who will be coming into office next year and would be our new Mancom, Joseph Cullis in Division 1, Peter Davis in Division 2, Steve Ambrose in Division 3 and Tony Bolton in Division 4, who are beginning to get more and more involved in the issues as a vice chairman coming through. But they've also participated as part of our kind of COVID-19 crisis team, as has Liz Speed, who is chair of our Social Responsibility Committee. She's been very much part and parcel of those conversations. And I'd like to thank you to Liz and Amanda Kiernan from Presepi, who's the vice chair of the SR committee. I also just wanted to thank Matt Ingram, who may be on the call, who is chairing our work on the Ethical Product Design Group, which is quite a mammoth task, I know, but he's doing a fantastic job, and that will have some very significant implications through the coming years, I'm sure, as I've explained to members at regional meetings and at division meetings. James also has thanked the regional chairs, especially Joseph in Scotland and Richard in Wales. Yes, we've been able to do without you guys. Thank you very, very much indeed. And I think we should also acknowledge the role of our grandees, our trustees, as we did earlier. They've provided lots of very wise counsel to us all, James, myself in particular, over some of the issues that we've had to deal with. I also, as I always do, and echoing what I said at the beginning, just want to thank every single member of BACTA. It's without your support, we can't do what we do. Yes, obviously you pay a subscription to us to deliver a service, and that's the obvious financial resource we need. But it's your heft, your weight, your support for what we do that enables us to keep achieving what we achieve. And I genuinely believe, I'll say it again, that BACTA punches above its weight. And I know a lot of trade bodies, that's my milieu, that's where I come from. We really do punch above our weight and get our voices across. Not always successfully, but we're there in the mix, making sure that our voices are heard. Like James, I'd like to thank our support team, Karen, who's sitting to my right at the moment, making sure all the technology works successfully. Steph, thank you for the PR, and the Interrail team have been amazing over the past 12 months, quite incredible. I also want to thank CoinSlot. They often get slagged off for all sorts of reasons. But to be fair to CoinSlot, they have actually been publishing all of the stuff that we wanted them to publish around the COVID-19 crisis, which I hope has helped in the communication with members. And I also want to take this opportunity, if I may, from me personally, to thank the staff too. I want to thank Linda, obviously not with us now, but obviously I've been working with Linda for a number of years, and I'd like to thank her for everything that she's done to support me during that time. Rob, as I said before, has just done an amazing job looking after our finances certainly in these straitened times. The audit has been a right headache, and he and the team, Sarah and Tim, have just really pulled out all the stops to get the accounts to you in time for today. Obviously, Teresa, I can't say enough about Teresa. Rather like James, she's been available morning, noon and night, Saturdays, Sundays. If there are any more days in the week, she would have been available. And Teresa, who is sitting on my left as I speak, thank you very much indeed. I'd also like to thank the MSOs, our membership support officers, as James has done. You know, Brad, Tony, David and Murray, they sometimes, you know, are a bit behind the scenes and you don't see them very often, but in their regions they are very well known, very well supported, and are providing the face of BACTA, if you like. It's not a particularly pretty face, I know, but they are providing a face of BACTA to the BACTA members and helping them out with all of those, you know, day-to-day little issues that crop up. Guys, from me, thank you very, very much indeed. If I've missed anyone out, I'm very, very sorry. I hope I've mentioned everybody that deserves thanks. But as I said again, it's been an incredible year. Thank you to everyone that supported BACTA. And please, from me personally, this is a genuine thank you. So we're now coming to just past, I've missed it. I wanted to finish at 1 o'clock. It's 3 minutes past 1. James, there's one last thing I need you to do.
You can shut up then, John, shouldn't you? Shouldn't you run along?
Yeah. It feels a bit like one of the Oscar speeches, I know, but thanking my mother. But we just need to close the meeting formally, and that honour passes to our president, James. If I could just ask you to do that, James. I'll say good afternoon to everybody, and I'll speak to you just as soon as I can.
Okay, thank you, John. For somebody who didn't want to go past 1 o'clock, didn't have to waffle on a bit there, but there we go. Nothing new. Right, ladies and gentlemen, as John says, it's my role to call this rather unusual virtual AGM to a close. As I said, I look forward to seeing you all again in the flesh and having a drink or two. And until then, I wish you all the very best. And BACTA, all of us here will continue to fight for every member. So thank you and good afternoon, and I'll speak to you all again soon.